She was chosen, not by fate, but by tradition. A young girl, barely stepping into womanhood, was to be sacrificed to appease the ancient spirits that guarded her village. The people believed it was the only way to stop the endless drought and hunger. But as she walked towards her doom, something happened that no one could have ever predicted. Naima's village had once been a land of abundance. The rivers flowed freely, nourishing the fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. Tall trees stood firm, their branches swaying gently under the golden embrace of the sun. The people lived in harmony, their laughter echoing through the hills as children played, elders told stories, and hunters returned with bountiful feasts. But that was years ago. Now, the earth beneath them was cracked, thirsting for the rain that had abandoned them. The riverbeds lay barren, their once powerful currents reduced to nothing but dust. The air was thick with despair, and hunger gnawed at their bellies like an unrelenting beast. Families sat in silence at night, their fires dim, their hope fading. The village elders, wise men who had guided their people through countless hardships, gathered in solemn council. Wrinkles of worry lined their faces as they spoke in hushed tones. They had searched for every possible solution, digging deeper wells, praying to the gods, offering gifts to the spirits, but nothing had worked. Then, an old prophecy was remembered. It was a story passed down through generations, one that spoke of a time when the land would dry up and the people would suffer. The only way to restore balance, according to the legend, was to offer a sacrifice to the ancient spirits. A life must be given so that the village could live. Fear gripped the hearts of the people. No one dared to question the wisdom of their ancestors, but the thought of taking an innocent life filled them with dread. Still, desperation overpowered their morality. The village had lost too much already. If the spirits required blood to bring back the rains, then they had no choice but to comply. The selection process was swift. A sacrifice had to be pure, untainted by greed, anger, or sin. She must be young, untouched by the corruption of the world. The elders searched, their eyes heavy with sorrow, until they found her. Naima. She was known for her kindness, a girl who never turned away from those in need. When others hoarded their last grains of food, she shared hers. When children cried from hunger, she comforted them. Her heart, though young, carried the weight of the entire village's suffering. When the decision was made, no one dared to oppose it. The villagers wept, but none spoke against the elders' decree. Mothers clutched their children, relieved it was not their own daughter chosen for the ritual. Fathers turned their gazes to the ground, guilt gnawing at them for allowing such a fate to befall one so innocent. Naima's own mother stood motionless, her face a mask of grief. Her hands trembled as she brushed her daughter's hair one final time. "You will save us all," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Naima did not protest. She did not run. Though fear coursed through her veins, she knew there was no escape. If her death could bring life to her people, then so be it. She lifted her chin, swallowing her fear, and stepped forward. The preparations began at dawn. The villagers gathered in the sacred clearing beyond the hills, a place where countless sacrifices had been made in the past, though none in living memory. The altar was prepared, draped in red cloth, surrounded by symbols carved into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, their smoke rising in spirals towards the sky. Drums echoed in the distance, their steady rhythm like the beating of a heart. The elders stood in a circle, their voices chanting prayers in the ancient tongue. Warriors, their faces solemn, guarded the path to the altar. No one could interfere. No one could stop what had already been decided. As the sun climbed higher, Naima was led to her final place of rest. The villagers averted their eyes, unable to bear the sight of what was to come. Some whispered silent prayers, others sobbed softly, their shoulders shaking with restrained grief. The moment had come. The elder priest, a man who had seen more years than any other, stepped forward. His hands, adorned with symbols of his sacred duty, trembled as he raised the ceremonial blade. The chanting grew louder, the wind howled through the trees, and the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. But then, something changed. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, so strong that it extinguished the torches surrounding the altar. The air grew thick, charged with an energy no one had felt before. The villagers gasped, their eyes widening in shock. The priest hesitated, his grip on the blade faltering. And then, the ground beneath them trembled. Gasps turned into screams as the earth cracked, splitting apart with a deafening roar. The sacred altar, untouched for centuries, began to shake. A low, guttural sound echoed through the valley, neither human nor animal. It was as if the spirits themselves had awoken from their slumber. Naima, still kneeling, lifted her gaze. Her heart pounded, but it was not fear that filled her now, it was something else. Something unexplainable. The sacrifice was meant to save the village. But what happened next was beyond anything they had ever imagined. Ima had been chosen as the sacrifice to appease the ancient spirits of her village. As the ceremonial blade was raised to take her life, a sudden and powerful force disrupted the ritual. The winds howled, the ground trembled, and a mysterious energy filled the air. Something unexpected was about to unfold. The chosen one. The moment the earth trembled beneath them, fear rippled through the crowd. The priest, whose hands had been steady moments ago, now clutched the ceremonial blade with uncertainty. Gasps and panicked whispers spread among the villagers. Some fell to their knees, believing the spirits had come to claim them all. Others turned to the elders, seeking answers in their aged, wisdom-filled eyes. But not even the wisest among them could comprehend what was happening. Naima, still kneeling at the altar, felt something stirring deep within her. The fear that had once gripped her was now replaced with a strange sense of clarity. The air around her crackled with an unseen force, like the charged sky before a storm. Then, without warning, the sacred flames surrounding the altar roared back to life, only now they burned blue. A collective gasp echoed through the gathering. This was not part of the ritual. Fire had always been a symbol of the spirits, but never had they seen it burn with such an unnatural hue. The priest staggered back, his voice caught in his throat as he stared at the flames. And then, a voice. Soft at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but growing stronger. It was neither man nor woman, young nor old. It was something beyond human. She is not to be taken. She is to be awakened. The words sent shivers down every spine. The elders, who had spent their lives deciphering the will of the spirits, were speechless. What did it mean? What had they done? Naima felt her body grow lighter, as if the force of gravity itself had lessened its grip on her. A warmth spread through her chest, not painful, but powerful, almost as if something inside her was unlocking. She gasped, her vision blurring for a moment, and then, she saw them. Figures. Shadows in the flames. They were neither solid nor transparent, their forms shifting like smoke. Ancient, wise, and powerful, they towered over the altar, their presence undeniable. The villagers shrank back in terror, some falling flat on their faces in reverence. Naima's lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't afraid, she couldn't be. A strange understanding was settling over her, as if she had known these beings all her life, yet only now could she see them. One of the figures stepped forward. It did not walk, but rather moved like a wisp of fire, gliding effortlessly through the air. Child of the earth, it spoke, its voice echoing like thunder, your blood was never meant to be spilled. Your destiny is far greater than this. Naima's breath caught in her throat. Destiny? What destiny? She had been told she was meant to die, that her sacrifice was the only way to save her people. But now, the very spirits they had sought to appease were saying otherwise. The priest, regaining some of his composure, stepped forward. His voice shook, but he dared to ask, Great Ones, forgive us. We only wished to end our suffering. The drought, the hunger, we were desperate. The spirits turned toward him, their gaze, though lacking eyes, seeming to pierce into his very soul. You have been misled, they responded. The suffering of your land was not caused by us. It was caused by man. Silence fell. The villagers exchanged confused glances. What did that mean? Had they been wrong all along? Naima, still kneeling, finally found her voice. Please, tell us the truth. The spirits swirled, their flames shifting, revealing images within their depths. The villagers watched in awe and horror as a vision unfolded before them. They saw men, outsiders, stealing from their rivers, diverting water away from their lands. They saw poisoned wells, dried-up springs, and fields burned not by the sun, but by the greed of those who sought to control them. It had never been the spirits punishing them. It had been other men. A murmur of outrage rose among the villagers. How had they been so blind? How had they allowed themselves to believe they were cursed, when all along their suffering had been caused by something far more human? Tears welled in Na'ima's eyes. All this time, she had accepted her fate, believing it was necessary. But she was never meant to die. She was meant to uncover the truth. The spirits turned back to her, their forms flickering like dying embers. You are the key to your people's salvation, Na'ima. Lead them. Restore balance. Do not fear the path ahead. It has already chosen you. With that, the blue flames extinguished, leaving only the crackling of burning wood behind. The spirits faded into the night, their presence lingering in the wind, in the rustling of leaves, in the very breath of the earth itself. Na'ima rose to her feet. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Strength filled her veins. A new-found purpose burned in her heart. The elders turned to her, their once firm beliefs shaken to the core. The villagers, who had watched her walk toward death, now looked at her with something different in their eyes. Not pity. Not sorrow. Hope. Na'ima took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady, unwavering. No more sacrifices. No more blind faith. We fight for what is ours. The people nodded, determination rising in their hearts. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time to reclaim their lives. Na'ima had been chosen. But not to die. She had been chosen to lead. Na'ima was meant to be sacrificed to save her village, but the spirits themselves stopped the ritual. They revealed that the suffering of the land was not due to an ancient curse, but rather the greed of men who had stolen their water and poisoned their lands. With the truth exposed, Na'ima stood before her people, no longer a sacrifice, but a leader. Now, it was time to fight back. A twist of fate. The night after the spirit's revelation was unlike any other. The village, once drowning in sorrow, now burned with an unspoken determination. Fires flickered, casting long shadows on the walls of mud huts, where families gathered in hushed discussions. The fear that had bound them for years was slowly unraveling, replaced by something else, something powerful. Hope. Na'ima sat in the center of the gathering, surrounded by the elders, warriors, and mothers who had once wept at her fate. Now, they looked at her with expectancy, awaiting her words. She was no longer the girl marked for death. She was the one who had stood in the presence of the spirits and lived. A silence fell over the crowd as she rose to her feet. The weight of what she had to say pressed against her chest, but she did not falter. We have been deceived. Her voice, though calm, carried an undeniable strength. All this time, we believed we were cursed. We sacrificed, we prayed, we starved, thinking it was the will of the spirits. But it was never them. It was men. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, already convinced. Others furrowed their brows, still struggling to accept the truth. The idea that their suffering had been caused by humans, rather than the gods they had worshipped for generations, was difficult to grasp. One of the elders, a man with a long, silver beard and eyes that had seen countless seasons, leaned forward. "And what would you have us do, Na'ima?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "We fight." Gasps spread through the villagers. They were farmers, herders, simple people. The idea of war was foreign, terrifying. A warrior, his muscular arms crossed over his chest, frowned. "We do not have weapons. We do not have numbers. We cannot fight those who have taken what is ours." Na'ima's heart pounded, but she refused to let doubt creep in. She turned to the villagers, her people, and spoke with conviction. "We have something greater than weapons. We have knowledge. We know the land, the rivers, the hidden paths. We know the enemy does not expect resistance. That is our strength." Another elder, a woman known for her wisdom, nodded slowly. "But we are weak from hunger. How can we stand against them in this state?" Na'ima took a deep breath. "We will not charge blindly into battle. We will be patient. We will outthink them, not outfight them." A new energy filled the gathering. Whispers turned into quiet discussions. Warriors exchanged glances, considering the possibilities. Mothers clutched their children, hope flickering in their tired eyes. Na'ima stepped forward, pointing towards the eastern horizon. "Tomorrow, we scout. We find where they have diverted our water. We learn their weaknesses. And when the time is right, we take back what is ours. For the first time in years, the villagers did not sleep in fear. They slept with purpose. The first step toward freedom. At dawn, Naima led a group of warriors through the dried-up riverbed, their feet kicking up clouds of dust with every step. The sun blazed overhead, but the heat did not deter them. They moved in silence, their eyes scanning the horizon, their senses sharp. It wasn't long before they found what they were looking for. A crude dam had been built at the edge of the valley, blocking the natural flow of the river. Beyond it, a large encampment stretched across the land, outsiders, dressed in heavy armor, guarding the stolen water as if it were gold. Naima clenched her fists. So this was the truth the spirits had revealed. These men had taken what was never theirs, leaving the village to suffer while they thrived. A warrior beside her, a man named Cato, whispered, "There are too many of them. We cannot attack them directly." Naima's mind raced. He was right. A full-scale assault would be suicide. But there was another way. "We don't need to fight them all," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the dam. "We only need to break their hold on our water." A plan began to form. If they could sabotage the dam, destroy it in the dead of night, then the water would return to its rightful place. The enemy would be powerless without their control over the land. She turned to her group, determination lighting up her features. "Tonight, we strike. Not with swords, but with strategy. The night of reckoning." As the moon rose high into the sky, Naima and her chosen warriors crept toward the enemy's stronghold. The campfires burned low, casting flickering shadows against the tents. The guards, overconfident in their stolen power, were few and distracted. Moving like ghosts, Naima and her people reached the dam. Large wooden beams held back the water, reinforced with heavy stones. But even the strongest structures had weak points. Using ropes and simple tools, they worked swiftly and quietly. One by one, the beams were loosened, the foundation weakened. The sound of rushing water grew louder, like a beast stirring from its slumber. Then, with one final pull, crack, the dam gave way. A roar of water surged forward, a mighty force reclaiming its path. The river, once stolen, now rushed back toward the village. Shouts of alarm rang out from the enemy camp as guards scrambled, their torches flickering wildly. Chaos erupted. But Naima and her warriors had already melted into the night, their mission complete. End of oppression, beginning of a new era. By sunrise, the village awoke to the sound of something they had almost forgotten, the gentle rush of flowing water. Women wept, their tears mixing with the river as it filled their empty pots. Children splashed in the cool streams, their laughter ringing through the valley. The drought was over. Naima stood at the river's edge, watching as her people rejoiced. She had not been their sacrifice, she had been their salvation. The enemy had underestimated them. They had thought them weak, broken. But they had been wrong. This was just the beginning. Naima uncovered the truth. The drought was not caused by angry spirits but by greedy men who had diverted their water. Instead of submitting to fate, she chose to fight back. Under the cover of night, she and a group of warriors sabotaged the enemy's dam, unleashing the river back to its rightful path. By morning, the village was reborn, the water returning as if it had never left. But this victory was only the beginning. The true sacrifice. The sun had barely risen when the first sign of retaliation came. A thick cloud of dust rose on the horizon as enemy warriors rode toward the village, their armor gleaming under the early light. They were enraged, their stolen power now reduced to nothing. They had controlled the water for years, profiting from the suffering of others, and now their grip had been broken. The villagers, once weak with despair, now stood ready. No longer did they bow their heads in hopeless surrender. They had tasted freedom, and they would not give it up. Naima stood at the center, flanked by Cato and the other warriors who had fought beside her. Her heart pounded, but she showed no fear. She had led her people to this moment, and she would see them through it. An elder stepped forward. "Naima, we have reclaimed our river, but we are not warriors. How can we stand against them?" She turned to her people, her voice steady. "We have already won half the battle. They expected us to remain weak, to keep believing their lies. But we are not the same people we were yesterday. We fight not with swords alone, but with unity, with knowledge, and with the strength of a people who refuse to be broken." The villagers nodded, their fear slowly turning into determination. As the enemy forces neared, Naima signaled the warriors. "We do not charge blindly. We use what we know. The land is ours. Let's make them regret ever thinking they could take it from us." The battle for freedom. The invaders stormed toward the village, expecting an easy conquest. But what they found was not a defenseless people, it was a force ready to defend what was theirs. Naima had spent the night preparing. The villagers had set up barricades, dug trenches, and crafted weapons from whatever they could find. They had placed traps along the paths leading into the village, false trails that led to dead ends, pitfalls covered in dry grass, and loose stones positioned to send riders tumbling. As the first wave of enemy soldiers rode in, they met chaos. Horses stumbled into hidden ditches, riders thrown to the ground before they could even lift their weapons. The warriors of the village, though fewer in number, fought with the strength of people who had everything to lose. Naima herself fought among them, wielding a spear with precise strikes. She was no longer the girl chosen to die, she was the symbol of a people reclaiming their fate. Cato, leading a group of warriors, took advantage of the confusion, striking at their enemies before they could regroup. The battle raged on, dust and sweat mixing under the scorching sun. The villagers, despite their lack of formal training, fought with the desperation of those protecting their home. Even the elderly and the children played their roles, throwing stones, distracting enemies, ensuring no one stood idle. But the enemy was relentless. They regrouped, their leader, a man with eyes as cold as steel, riding to the front. He raised his sword, his voice booming. "Burn it all. If we cannot have it, they will have nothing." The order sent a shiver through the villagers. Flames licked at the edges of their homes as torches were hurled. The river had returned, but now their very existence was at risk. Naima's eyes blazed with fury. "We end this now." She sprinted toward the leader, weaving through the chaos. She had no armor, no shield, only the will to fight. The enemy leader saw her coming and smirked, believing her no threat. But he underestimated her. With one swift movement, Naima ducked under his sword and struck, her spear finding its mark between the plates of his armor. He gasped, his weapon falling from his grip. The moment his body hit the ground, silence fell over the battlefield. His soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, hesitated. Fear flickered in their eyes. Naima did not gloat. She did not revel in victory. Instead, she stood tall, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "Your leader is gone. Your fight is over. Leave now, and never return." One by one, the enemy soldiers dropped their weapons. They had lost not just the battle, but the will to fight. Within moments, they turned and fled, disappearing over the horizon. The village had won. A new dawn. As the last enemy disappeared from sight, the villagers erupted in cheers. They embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. The flames were extinguished, the wounded tended to, the fallen honored. Naima stood at the river's edge, gazing at the water that had cost so much to reclaim. It was not just water, it was their future, their survival, their freedom. Cato stepped beside her, a deep cut on his arm but a triumphant smile on his face. "You saved us, Naima. Without you, none of this would have been possible." She shook her head. "We saved ourselves. I only helped you see the truth." The elders approached, their eyes filled with pride. "You were meant to be our sacrifice," one of them said. "But instead, you became our salvation." Naima turned to the village, seeing the hope shining in their eyes. 4 years, they had believed they were powerless. Now they knew the truth. They were not weak. They were not cursed. They were free. The spirits had not demanded blood, they had demanded awakening. And now, their people would never be blind again. As the sun set over the land, casting golden light over the flowing river, Naima knew this was only the beginning. The village would rebuild, stronger than before. And if ever another threat came, they would not cower. Because now, they knew their worth. Now, they knew their strength. And no one would take it from them again.